Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I am the founder and CEO of Lone Design Club. And we're here tonight with a very special guest joining us. I hope you've all seen across our marketing and Instagram stories. We've got Yossi Fisher, who is brand strategist and creative consultant, joining us any moment now, where we are going to be discussing all. Cool, I think this is working. Waiting, connecting. Okay. Yossi.
Oh, hello, 1 second, sorry. There we go.
Perfect. There you go. Great. Classic. It's all right. It happens. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I didn't realize my screen, my thing was turned on. I was like, wait a second, why is it?
It's fine. How are you doing?
I'm really good. I'm really good. Thank you so kindly for having me today.
No, it's exciting. We're super excited to have you on. So obviously we've known each other not too long, maybe 6 months or so now.
I think actually a little longer. I think we're somewhere in between. Like, I think we're past a season, but not into two. So maybe about 9 months or so. Because
Yeah.
I met you when you were doing your pop up, not this season, but last season during Milan Fashion Week, or in between the seasons.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was over in Milan, and then Laura, for a mutual PR contact, introduced us. And it's been great. We've kind of kept in touch since. Now here we are in two very different locations, but going through the exact same current crisis situation that we're all going through.
Sure.
So welcome. I'm really excited to talk to you tonight. I've been waiting a lot for this kind of topic. And I think a lot of the designers and people that we have listening this evening are very much interested, especially to hear your insights as a brand strategist and creative consultant, but also what you're seeing happening in Italy and in Milan now, and what us here in the UK and London, what us as consumers and designers, what we can learn from what's happening. And also, we're going to speak a little bit about our thoughts on post COVID-19, what that means for us as small businesses, as designers, and as consumers. So it should be a really great conversation.
Looking forward, yeah.
Cool. So before we dive in, I think it'd be amazing. Obviously, I've introduced you a little bit, but if you could just give us a little overview on your background, what you've been up to, what you're up to, just for a little context.
Yeah, sure. So for everybody that doesn't know me, my name's Yossi Fisher. And like Rebecca said, I'm a brand consultant, creative strategist. I've been in the industry for 20 years now, and I've worked in so many different facets of it. Got out of high school and started a fashion boutique, which brought me into like wholesale and buying, and kind of like the whole brand world essentially is where I first started, because I was buying for the store as well. And so I got into that kind of ecosystem. And then throughout the years, I've done plenty of stuff. I moved from there and I was doing designing and private label development for brands like Wimbledon Tennis. I've done styling as well, everything from editorial to commercial. I've done Wu-Tang videos. I've done Virgin Mobile campaigns. I've done editorials for Hunger, pretty big collaborations with Refinery 29. So I've kind of really gone through the whole gamut of the industry, not just the creative, but very much the business of it. And yeah, started Yossi Fisher Studio in 2014. And since then, I've been helping brands with their holistic approach to market. I've lived in pretty much every major city and worked in every major market in the world. And now I'm here with you guys.
Yeah, amazing. No, that's great. And you're currently based in Milan. Are you in the city, or whereabouts are you
I
are?
am. So yeah, exactly. So I moved to Milan about 2.5 years ago. It's been a great city that's been bubbling and buzzing and really up and coming, and has really shown that in their actions. And I live right by the Prada Foundation. So there's two main circles. There's like the middle circle where like the Duomo is and all of that. And then there's another circle, which is central. And it's kind of like if you were to compare where I live in comparison to like London, I'm pretty much by Liverpool Street Station.
Okay, so you're right in the heart of it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on that cusp where I'm still very much, it's like a 45-minute walk from here to center. So
Cool. Okay, great. Amazing. Cool. Well, let's dive in. So just for those of you who have just joined us, so the topic for this evening, or what we want to discuss and really delve into deep, we want to know we want to discuss what we think the fashion industry is going to look like post COVID-19. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening now, what we're seeing in the UK and what we're seeing in Milan, with a particular focus on how can we hear UK, London, small businesses, brands, and consumers, how can we look and see what's happening in Italy, and prepare ourselves. We've spoken, or I'm sure everyone's seen this in the news, we're all talking about it. Italy is about two weeks ahead of what's happening here in the UK. So let's unpick the situation a little. Let's start, I think what would be great to start with is, being as a brand strategist, creative consultant, like you said, you've worked with very small businesses, you've worked with very big businesses, you've worked totally across the board. So you have a really unique overview of what's going on in the industry, what was happening and what's happening now. And I think this is really interesting. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more, what challenges and adjustments are we seeing brands and businesses make right now in coping with the current pandemic?
Totally. So, I mean, I think the most fascinating thing about what's happening right now is that this whole situation has essentially been the great equalizer. So all brands, whether you're big or small, you have to react to the market in essentially the same way right now. And that's with empathy. Like, you really have to lead with, not with products, but with services. How can you be of service to the industry? For major, like massive companies, that's talking about how they're taking care of their employees and how they're dealing with it internally, right? It's not just an outward market conversation. It's just actions across the board. Now, when we talk about smaller businesses and brands like that, well, that's your approach to your consumer, right? And it's like, how are you providing value and kind of a bit of solace in this time of uncertainty? And I think that where we're all kind of being affected emotionally is when we're seeing a lot of brands kind of floundering and trying to push for more sales. As consumers, we're very taken by that. We're like, you're not being empathetic. Like I don't have the money to spend right now. Like, I just lost my job. Like, why are you trying to like push more sales on me and drive more sales? But what we are seeing is brands and businesses, products or services that are giving, that are providing more. I mean, we're all attracted way more to that. We're being, like, for example, live like this and what LDC is doing is incredible. I really, really love your approach. Thanks. The fact that you're giving so much, that you're including people, you're making them feel safe and secure without extracting from them, I think it's fundamentally not only what's happening right now, but the way of the future for brands. And so we were just talking, like, your products and services ultimately need to come last. And obviously the value has to be there. Like, if you eventually get me to buy your product, it has to be great and it's got to be good quality, and that's a different conversation. Same thing with services. I got to feel the value. But ultimately, it's more about, the relationship that you're having, the communities that you're building. Like, even myself, right? Like, this is actually a really great time for brands and businesses to reach out to me. But instead of putting out like discounts and promotions, I'm doing live like this and just giving it all away for free, because I can see in my DMs like how much people are appreciating it at a time of uncertainty. And I think that that's what it's about. It's, either the live or creating channels or content that's providing emotional value. And I think that's the way of the future there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's very much a support, sense of camaraderie time. Everyone is very emotional. There's definitely the element of sensitivity. And it is actually amazing sitting back and watching and seeing people come together digitally, almost be closer together, sharing free content, sharing resources, uniting. The sense of exclusivity feels like especially the fashion industry, it feels like things have changed, and actually it's about inclusiveness. And in a way, it does feel like this has brought us together as businesses, as industries, but also for consumers connecting with brands. I mean, just like you were saying, we're certainly seeing it with our designers, with our customers at LDC. People more than ever want to connect with, the behind the scenes of a business. We're asking people, or we're finding that they're connecting most with, the team working from home, the little things that they're doing.
I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I'm having a really hard time hearing you for some reason right now.
Okay.
I don't know if that's just my connection, but
strange. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I think it might be. I'm so sorry, everybody. Go say.
Is that working?
for some reason, I'm so sorry. Would it be okay if I just
Yeah, nip out.
let me just nip and come right back. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, it's fine. I'm just gonna keep. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna keep talking until Yossi comes back in. I think we're having a bit of an issue. With his connection. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Hopefully that seems to be a yes, which is good. All right, let's bring him back in. Okay, Yossi?
Yeah, perfect now. Absolutely perfect now. I don't know. I apologize for that if that was on my side. Thank you all so kindly for staying. Took a couple of seconds there.
Cool. I'm sure. I'm glad it's sorted. It's the only thing with technology, isn't it? That when it drops off, it drops off. There's some things you just can't replace being face to face. But anyway, we let it through. So what we're saying, so we were talking about community and talking about being sensitive and being emotional right now. And I think, as you were saying, I think that's so important. I mean, what we're seeing, all the brands we're seeing winning, or what people are responding to, is that behind the scenes conversations and reactions, showing that humanness. And I think for brands now more than ever, this is the time to show your vulnerability, your sensitivity, and that person behind the brand, not just that, like you were saying, that hard sell, but everything behind it. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Milan. You know, I think everyone's really curious to hear. So what is happening? What are you seeing? Tell us what's going on right now.
Yeah, totally. So it's actually pretty interesting because although we are 2 weeks ahead of London, we are still in quarantine. So we had an April 15th checkpoint, and now we're pushed through to May 3rd. So the good thing about that, though, is that this time it feels like we're flattening the curve significantly. The mortality rate is actually lowering right now, which means that less people are passing away. So what the cool thing is now we're really looking towards the market reopening in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. Now, as opposed to where London and a lot of other businesses they're still kind of in defense because they're really not sure. We're now seeing a bit more conversations about, well, where do we go now? Like, what's it actually going to look like? Because we actually have more or less like a, kind of like the clock is ticking downwards now, mm-hmm. which we can actually start going through. So, I mean, I think it really stems over to what we were just talking about, but it's now taking that and realizing how does that manifest into a live market? Yeah. Now, I think that what's going to happen is, yes, we are going to be outside more, but there's still going to be a lot of cautions and a lot of things we got to worry about. Like, not everyone's just going to like want to go outside and be in public. Like, some will, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to start shopping again, let alone outside, right? So I think that a lot of brands want to be looking at their digital strategies now and how to keep leveraging that at least for the next 3 to 6 months. Now, the market could open up and it could boom. No one really knows, right? It's kind of speculation, but ultimately, if you're planning on drops, so like if you're planning on releasing your season or you've been holding it back, and now you're like, well, what do I do? Because a lot of my retailers run out of business because mm-hmm. that's happening. You might want to look at digital initiatives to maybe do online viewings, mm-hmm. connecting with your consumers, maybe sending like your mail or an email and say, hey, we're doing individual private viewings now for the collection. And then you can do one-on-ones and say, if you'd like, I'd love to hop on a Zoom call with you or a Skype and actually walk you through the collection. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them for you. And so you're now going into sell mode, but you're still creating so much value for the other people. It's a lot more human. And I think that ultimately that's what a lot of brands want to be focusing on, is not losing that human aspect and being like, oh, great, now I can start selling, but really looking at it. I think that the good thing with that for a lot of brands as well is that when you do go online, so potentially some of your retailers might have gone out of business, but now if you go online, your margins are a lot higher. A lot lower. So, you're making a lot more money. My apologies, because depending on how you're talking about margins, it might be a bit tricky. But essentially what you're doing is now you're making more money on your pieces, which means that you can provide a different type of price point that might potentially find a strategy within the noise.
Yeah. And I guess that's almost like another That's another question for brands is, yes, it's opening up this opportunity to go direct to consumer, to build an e-commerce, or to go online. But how do you then, there's a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of noise out there right now. We're hearing a lot where marketing spend is the first thing big businesses are cutting, but there are still a lot of businesses out there that are seeing this as opportunity, that are upping their spend, that are monopolizing, this online sphere. More and more businesses are now going direct to consumer through the online. So what advice would you give to small brands, trying to navigate this?
Totally. So this is a great question. And that's really where the brands that have been building community for so long are going to succeed. And that's why people really need to start looking forward. So you are 100% correct. A lot of big brands, a lot of big businesses have the spend that they can now just, you know what I mean? Like they can buy ads and media and, their SEO can drive. So this is really where you have to go direct to consumer, like direct to customer, like send DMs. You have a mailing list that is literally zero friction and there's no barriers there. So send over your emails, check your open rates, try to create in your mailers maybe some checkpoints of clicks where you can then look at your reports and be like, oh, you know what? These people clicked on this, which means that they were interested in this product. Or, hey, you know what? They were interested in this. And then you can send an email, a personal email, and say, or, hey, I'd like to talk to you more about it. Like there's so many ways that you can do that. So, it's about not being a part of the noise because we all have one feed, right? And everyone's gonna be fighting for that. So looking at text messaging platforms as well right now is massive because there's zero barrier between you and your clients and your customers. So you can really start breaking down your demographics, you can niche them out, and you can really attack it in a sense where you're not putting, you're not worried about also not having the money to spend. But technically right now, essentially, you don't really need it as much as everyone thinks. And you see what I'm saying? And so the smaller brands and the medium-sized brands, it's actually a lot easier for them to do that because if you're a massive, huge company, I mean, you can't do that. You can't go one by one. You can't check individual analytics and then, implement a strategy towards it. So I actually think that small, medium businesses are actually in a really great place and they're playing on better leverage than a lot of the bigger companies are.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is a good point. And how about the customer's response to this? Because this is a big shift. We're as businesses, our businesses, especially businesses that are focused on physical or physical bricks and mortar, our entire industry is tipped on its head. This is a completely new game. So customers must also be feeling a little overwhelmed. Also, this is new for them too. So what responses are we seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that empathetic thing is super important. I think that nobody wants to be sold like at all right now. People are very, very sensitive to that because everyone's going through, and it's a very interesting space to navigate because there's so many people that are going through so many different dynamic emotions and lifestyle changes, right? You have freelancers, for example, that are, we're essentially working on day rates that they're not unemployed, but they have to figure that out. Some people have been unemployed. But then some people haven't been. And, there's this big term going on right now called revenge spending. And it's not as dramatic as it sounds, but essentially it's like people are going to, like, once this is done, consumers are going to want to go out and kind of like revenge shop against Corona and be like, I'm back. I'm going to spend my money. Corona can't stop me. It's kind of the revenge to the whole pandemic. So, there's a lot of spaces to play in. I think this is where a really good solid analytics and research comes in. Back to how, and not saying that emails is the only thing, but it's a really great way to put, so let's say you have a mailer and you started to create some content to create some value for people. Yeah. And let's say that it's, I don't know, like if you're a CBD brand, for example, and you now have a channel for mental health and it kind of talks people through, it gives people advice, different tips. Well, maybe in your mailer, you can have one link to that and then another link to your product, and then see what people are clicking. And then you actually can frame where their perspectives are. Now, that's not also just about, that's not talking just about mailers. You can do that with all your socials as well. I think you need to deploy, you need to really test right now. It's the only thing anybody can do. So if you're putting posts and stories for product, but also for all these free value pieces and all these channels, and look at your analytics. Be like, okay, you know what? It turns out that, there are some people that are still, that are looking to spend. So let's create a strategy there. Oh, you know what? It looks like nobody's clicking and no one's liking the sell, but everybody's loving the content. So let's double down on that and then reformat it as we go. I think that's probably the most fundamental thing anyone can do. One other thing I want to say in terms of social, being on as many platforms as you can right now is super important, because what being on many different platforms does is it allows your brand to express itself in many different ways, and it expands your reach and the dynamic of your entire culture. So when I see a lot of brands and businesses, have 5, 6, 7 platforms, but they're sharing the same content, well, they think they're opening up their reach, but they're actually minimizing it. Because what happens is that if I'm following you on 6 platforms and you're sharing the same content, well, then I'm going to follow you on 1, not 6. So I think that this is a really great time for brands and businesses to really diversify their strategies and understand the nuances on these different platforms, because it also adds additional levels of market research and strategy, and also expressing more of your brand value and culture. And if you find it hard to do that, well, then you've just discovered a flaw in your business where you need to step back and really understand the conversation.
Yeah, interesting. We've had a good question actually come through, so I'm going to read it out now. And on that note, if anyone has any questions, please throw them in the comment section. We're going to read them as we go. We're going to keep this very conversational. We want you to get as much as you can out of it. So I've had someone write in, are we going to see smaller and indie brands come to their own? Because unlike bigger brands, there's less system restrictions, there's less people in business to approve or sign off ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I was saying at the beginning, I think that this right now is essentially the great equalizer. I think that a lot of small and indie brands have a lot more permission to navigate. I think that I think the biggest take right now is that because a lot of these bigger brands and businesses, they've been around for so long and they have so much legacy and so much brand already ingrained in everything that they do. A lot of these small businesses, so for example, Gucci, right? Everything they do is a sell. Mm-hmm. Everything they do. But they're allowed to, because everything about their brand and their culture and their vibe is in every one of those advertisements. So they're not just selling you product, they're always elaborating their culture, right? Through all their content. Now, what smaller brands are doing, unfortunately, is they're looking at that and being like, well, Gucci's selling, so I'm just going to sell. But they haven't matured in the market enough yet to actually have a culture and a DNA ingrained in that message. And so I think that right now, if smaller brands are looking towards literally having free reign, well, then I think they have to look at their finances. And I think they have to really look at the next 12 to 18 months, because this is a long game. And if you're like, I need to make my full margins, once we get out of this, well, you're playing a losing battle anyways. So you kind of really have to look at it and say, okay, so what are my finances over the next 8 to 12, 12 to 18 months, depending on what your space is. And you kind of have to almost look at where your spends are and see where you can minimize, see where you might not need full collections, see maybe you can now bounce into collaborations, which obviously splits a lot of costs. Maybe you go to smaller capsules and monthly drops instead of this big collection you were hoping to produce all at once, because factories are going to be not only more closed, but also in a lot more strain. So if you have 30 pieces that you were hoping to be dropping after this is done, or you were hoping to before this was done, well, maybe break that down to maybe 8. Get your production out quicker, but then drop every month or so another piece, and then that allows you to breathe. And listen, if you're a small brand and that's your thing, and you're like, but how can I survive? Well, you got to humble yourself. Go get a part-time job. If that's what you need to do. This is, the romance has to come out of this. I tell people all the time, when I moved to London. I lived in London for a while, maybe, 9, 10 years ago now. And literally, I broke in I had about a 10, 11 year career already, but I started fresh in London. So I was front row at all my fashion shows, and I was going to PR and press days and this, that, and the third. But I needed to slow roll my finances. So I literally got a job at a coffee shop. And this is after 11 years of working with some of the biggest brands in the world. I needed to be humble and say, okay, listen, I need some humility right now. I can't go in and try to go hard because I don't know what's going to happen and I don't want to sink and have to leave. So I would go to Fashion Week and I would be sitting front row and all this, all the glam, but then I would literally go to work at night and I would serve steaks and I would serve wine. And You know, I remember I used to take the care packages, like the front row gifts. I used to give it to the ladies there. You know, I haven't had hair in a long time. So, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that people really need to really reflect on the strategy and not be so idealistic and romantic and be like, listen, if you want to be here forever, then you have to look at your finances and you have to look at your strategy. I mean, it's really that simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the only thing I would add to that is going back to what you were saying earlier, you know, with the analytics and data, is that now is the time. And on that note, I do think the advantage that small brands have is you're agile and you can react way faster, especially 100%. If you're a one-man band, two-man band. You're in a better position in many ways because you can react and test, and it's just you. You don't have teams to go through. You don't have hoops. You don't have, you know, big logs and processes. So take advantage of that. And like what Yossi said, which is really great, is this is a free-for-all. This is a total equalizer. There is not necessarily anyone that can 100% win at this. Yes, big brands are monopolizing the marketing spend, marketing spend. But like Yossi said, it's not about quantity right now. It's about quality, and it's about relationship, community building. This is a great time to use that and to really understand your business and where you want to take it.
Definitely.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, great question. I like these. I like the on the spot, off the cuff, because it makes me think too, right? It makes me dive into really what's going on, and you know, I'm really, yeah, this is fun. I like this.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. Okay, so going on to another question. Let's talk a little bit about trends. Or what we're seeing emerging from this on a customer level. So we've spoken a bit about customers reacting well. Is there anything or any trends, or I hate to use the word trends, I don't like it, but I guess right now they would be, because these things are, you know, these directions are just cropping up. Anything that we're seeing, whether it be, so sustainability is something that I don't like to call it a trend, but it does feel like here in the UK anyway, we're seeing people gravitate towards supporting local economies. You know, supporting their small local businesses as much as they can digitally, or, you know, doing deliveries, or, you know, what are we kind of seeing on that note that's emerging?
Totally. So definitely a whole bunch of stuff. So sustainability is definitely what a lot of people are leaning into. So that's definitely something that everybody wants to be aware of. I think that the one thing that I personally find, which I think a lot of people need to start remedying in the sustainability movement, are the price points. I think that that's something we're going to really have to see change, because if my values are completely rooted in the fundamentals and the ethics of sustainability, but designer price points are so high that I can't afford it, well, then I have to go to fast fashion. And that doesn't make me feel good about it. It just means that sustainability right now is pricing a lot of people out. And I think that that's why we're not seeing a more rapid growth on it. And it's more idealistic, like people that are like, oh, we'll spend more and buy less. Like, but what if I can't spend more? Like, what if I don't have that luxury? And especially coming into the new market right now, not everyone's going to have that extra luxury. Like, the difference between a $100 or, you know, a 70, 80 pound jumper as opposed to 180, 250. I mean, that's groceries for half a month. You know what I mean? Like, depending on how you're eating. Like, so I think fundamentally, I think sustainability is definitely the way forward, and it has a lot of kinks. But if you're a sustainable designer, then I think you really want to look at that, because it is a trend that's emerging, but you don't want to price yourself out in a place where the people want it, but they can't afford it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a challenge. And I empathize with that, because it is. I mean, we're all going to go through a lot of challenges right now in every sector. The other thing right now also is we have to look at the digital movement.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to be a massive trend that's actually not going to go anywhere. We're going to see a lot more implementations across all kinds of it. We're going to see D2C. We're going to see experiential. We're going to see fashion weeks. You know, even as designers, you know, we're, you know, looking at even actually talking about sustainability. So when you design clothes virtually, you still do need a pattern. You need a designer to actually design it. It's not just superimposing, because it has to flow, like your avatars have to move, like it's an actual pattern. So what a lot of designers can do right now actually is design their collections via like VR type processes, like digital processes, and then they can construct their garments and then see how it looks, see what stitching is not correct, see where it doesn't line up. And instead of doing all that waste on samples and pattern drafting and all that jazz, they can actually clean up their designs with way less use and way less money, And then once it's done well, then they can do that. And then once you have that, you look into a lot of different things. You look into how you're working with digital mediums versus like in terms of your campaigns. Like, and you know, when you don't have to worry about photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, lighters, locations, like when you really don't have to do that. And then you can actually say, okay, I'm actually going to create some sort of shoot. Maybe it's part human, part digital. There's so much in that space. But now you're looking at like, well, it might cost you, it might be new costs that you're not aware of that you have to learn about. But then, you know, you might look at more opportunities because once you have those avatars, you can then use them over and over. You can send them out as digital lookbooks. You can actually do your shot. You can do your buy. If you have a digital designer that's fundamentally great and they cost you a little bit more, but it's practically lifelike, well, you can send color casts. You can send your collections out to potential consumers and some of your customers, just like they're buying online right now. And so I think that there's a lot of different ways. I'm not saying that the human aspect's going to be eliminated. There will be need for photo shoots. I'm not saying that that's not the case. But when we're looking into this new world, I think that you know, I think that those two things are really fundamentally important to look at.
Yeah. On that note as well, I mean, what does this mean for Fashion Week? You know, we've already had Milan, you know, New York just scraped by. London, we just kind of got through it, you know, albeit shaky. Milan, the tail end got hit. Paris was pretty disrupted. Already we're seeing resort, we're seeing men's cancelled in Paris. You know, so what is the Fashion Week? I mean, I guess, you know, we're going digital, but how are we going to do this?
Right. So it's interesting. So there's a lot of very intriguing conversations around this exact question. Right now, actually, we're even looking and seeing like if even September is going to happen. You know, realistically, I mean, you know, there's a lot of planning that goes into that, not to mention the actual design aspects, the teams that are associated, the build up to Fashion Weeks. So, and then also the spends, like will we be able to actually have a structured Fashion Week anymore? That's really open for debate because I don't think it's a matter of whether it's the BFC or Mercedes-Benz deciding whether there's going to be one or not. It's going to be like, are there going to be enough designers to facilitate the need? So I do think that we will still see something in September. I don't think that it's going to blank out, but I think that what we'll probably end up seeing are a lot more digital initiatives. We're already seeing it right now. You go to Fashion Week online, they're having digital initiatives with Russia, with Russian Fashion Week. You know, there's a lot of things going on there. So we might see a lot more digital applications. Now, the exciting part about that is the depth of how far you can go, because now, for example, what if you're one of these massive brands and these huge, you know, that actually can afford it, and you send out branded VR headsets and you have a designer to actually create an entire ecosystem where I can now be in my home and walk around your show or still sit front row, but have a bit more of a dynamic experience, right? Like this can go really, really deep. This isn't just models walking up and down the runway virtually. It's like you can literally invite me into an entire ecosystem and I can explore it for 2 hours. I don't know, right? Now, in terms of the human aspect of it, I do think we're going to still see things happening, but I don't know if we're going to see people flying around to go to specific fashion weeks. So I think that's going to be really good, actually. So right now, what will end up happening is like a lot of these designers will probably do stuff more locally, which will create a lot more buzz in their own cities. I don't know if we're going to see standalone fashion weeks because of the finances. I'm not saying we're not going to, but we'll probably see a lot more experiential things, more events, more presentations, maybe even fashion shows tied into those things. But we will see them localized, I feel, and that'll actually be really good for the industry because now you're dealing with a bit more exclusive content. So during Fashion Week, when we're all in one city and we're all at the same shows showing the exact same content, it's kind of like, okay, like you see all the lines on everybody's, and you're like, okay, I just saw this show, I'm going to go to somewhere else. But now all your favorite influencers or your media outlets or, you know, whoever's covering it, all of a sudden, based on where they are geographically, it's a different experience. So you're actually experiencing different cities, different, you know, different, like, it's just different every person you go to. And so I think that's going to be a really exciting thing to consider.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think also on that note that just one of the things that kind of just hit me is, so, you know, travel, you were saying, you know, travel is going to be disrupted. I mean, I think we could probably argue that travel and tourism right now are one of the most, or probably the most disrupted industry. And obviously that is going to have an impact on Fashion Week and, you know, attendees, attendances, and everything like that. But how is that going to affect, or how is travel going to affect, you know, bricks and mortar stores, or if when we do get back to this in terms of tourism and retail, this is surely going to be quite an interesting sector. I mean, I'm hearing a lot, or where that as opposed, gone a bit crazy.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Oh, you froze on. Oh, there we go.
I think it's back. Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Instead of, you know, instead of this globalization that we've been building up to, you know, the whole world, there's talk of this retracting, and we're, you know, becoming more, you know, we're going to stay more, you know, to our nation. This is quite interesting because this is going to impact hugely, you know, retail, especially our retail. About 30% of our trade is tourism. People spend when they're on holiday. They want to bring something back. I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what that's going to look like, and how will that relationship with consumers continue post, you know, COVID-19?
Listen, I think it's a really important thing to note. And I think that, you know, fundamentally, there's not going to be a solution for everything. I think people need to realize that, you know, here in Milan, for example, you know, the Asian tourism is massive for our luxury sector, right? Like, they all come out here and they spend a lot of money. There's no question. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have all the locals spending that kind of money on luxury out here. So that's fundamentally going to change, because the fact that borders, we don't know when they're even going to open. So
yeah, exactly.
You know, not even about whether people want to or not. It's like, you know, we're looking at right now, like, you know, Italy might keep their borders closed. They might open them, but if Canada, the US doesn't open them, well, then even if I want to travel, I can't, like, and vice versa, right? So I think that, like I said, that there's no, like, some things are just inevitably going to happen. They're going to completely change the landscape. But like I said, to what I, you know, about before, it's like, you know, if you have a shop that, you know, is heavily, you know, heavily leans on tourism, well, then you need to get somebody to do a full 360 experience in your shop, where you can put that online, where those customers that can't come to your store anymore can have your in-shop experience still. They can see what's new and fresh. They can go on their browsers and zoom into different things. They can pivot, look at an item, they can zoom in, it'll come up so they can see a photo of it. They can see the price point, what it's made out of. They can twirl it. Like, I think that experience is still, like, you can still provide that experience. And I know it sounds super grandiose, but that kind of technology has been around for a long time. Like, that's not crazy dollars. That's just saying, you know, back to the finance thing, it's like, you know, people need to strategize their losses right now. Like, inevitably, you know, you're going to be losing money. So take the money you do have and say, okay, well, we know that we're going to be in a loss. How can we minimize some of them, and then take that loss, but then invest some of it in other things that will progressively bring more business over the next 3 to 6 months? Like, this isn't even an 18-month strategy. This is like, how do you implement something for 3 months that you'll start seeing, you know, sales back in within 3 to 6. And that just goes back. It goes back to finances and figuring out how, you know, what's possible. And listen, this isn't a fairy tale situation. I'm not gonna, you know, I don't like bullshitting. A lot of businesses won't be able to do it, and a lot of them will go under. And that's just the truth. Now, we have seen a lot of designers have, you know, their own brands and collections and fashion houses, and then drop and then start again. Like, you know, there's so much you can do. Like, even in this industry right now, I think that when people are looking at, okay, well, maybe being a designer or a retail shop wasn't it, but maybe you're great at retail concepts. And now you create a business that's based on retail concepts for other retail stores that are thriving, that have the finances. Like, I think we have to leverage our skills and, you know, like, our special characteristics. Like, so I think that it's really going to be a complete 180, and it's going to be a complete shift. And I think that if people are expecting the way that like, everyone's like, we want change, but somehow expect that what they do or what they provide is going to stay the same. And I'm getting a lot of these woe is me conversations, like, oh, well, what if we don't need more? It's like, well, you just said you want the industry to change. It has to change. So fundamentally, certain things aren't going to be needed. A lot of businesses are going to go under, but it doesn't mean that that's a failure or that's like a dead end, like, oh, now your career's done. It's about innovating and being like, how can I be of support? Like, you know, even looking like, if you're a sustainable designer and you're brilliant at it, and you know so much about everything from like fabrics to the ethics to the manufacturing to where to get the right products. Like, what if you're a sustainable strategist for a brand? That is very, very well going to be a new role in companies. I fundamentally see it. And if it's not, then pitch it. Be like, hey, listen, like, I know this stuff. I love your brand. I love what you're doing. Let me be your sustainability strategist. Like, people really need to look outside of the box, because you can go on defense and go, woe is me, but fundamentally that's just not how business works. Like,
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're right. I mean, we're in an age where this is the time to pivot now more than ever. It's time to pivot. It's time to look at what works, what doesn't. It's time to be serious and brutal with finances. And I think you're right. So we've got one question here that we kind of did touch on, but let's go a little bit deeper, because I think we need to be really clear on this,
Sure.
for the sake of everybody listening. So somebody has asked, after the pandemic, do you think high street shopping will be booming? We have touched on this, but I think this is a really important one, because we're not going to suddenly return to normal. There's not going to be this massive running outside renaissance where we all start kissing and life is changed. It's different now. We're not going to go back to normal. It's going to be a new kind of normal. And I think everyone needs to be really realistic about what that actually means, because it is serious, and it is, like Yossi, like we've been saying, this is having a massive impact. All businesses, this is not a period. And I've spoken to a lot of other businesses, or I've heard a lot of founders or small business owners who are like, oh, it's fine, I'm just going to ride it out, and when it's over, we'll be back. Do not make that mistake. Things are different. And this is the time, like this whole conversation, this is the time to pivot. This is the time to read, to gain knowledge, to listen to conversations, to have conversations, to work out where your next move is, because the future it's going to be different.
Yeah, definitely. So if you want to read that question again, just because you cut off for me a little bit at the end, I just want to make sure I get the full. It's okay.
Sure. So the question was, after the pandemic, do you think high street shopping will be booming?
I think that I don't actually really know. I don't know if it will. And that's not saying that it's gonna. I think there'll be a lot of, once people get comfortable being outside, people are gonna love to go outside. But I mean, we're looking at high street collapsing right now. And so, I mean, that definition of what high street even is anymore, well, that's open for debate as well. Like, is it going to be high street shopping, or is it going to now be high street experiences? I mean, like, I think that right now a lot of retail can really start looking at how to leverage both of them, like how to create an experience in your shop, but not be blind to the fact that a lot of people for years now have gone into a store, tried on stuff, and bought it online. And that's been a reduction in sales and also in, what's it called? It's just, it's kind of affected, like, even salespeople, right? Like the commissions that they make. Then that's been going on for years. So like, how do we remedy that? Because I'm sitting here working on a low wage because I'm supposed to be making commissions, but now my commissions are going online and there's no way to do it. So why not create a system where you literally, like, let's say you have a retail shop and you now have just literally like one size run for every product that you have, and you get people to try it on, and then they can just order it, and then they just go straight to the store, like go straight to your house, like, so I can experience that. But also, it doesn't have to be direct with shopping. Like, now it's a great time to really collaborate with it. What LDC is doing is really great, because it allows, and I think that even, I think that for pop-ups too, it's also a matter of curating the internal space and having concepts and specific styles of brands and companies in that one space at once, so that all the brands are actually leveraging all the other brands into the same culture ecosystem. So now the experience inside is one wholesome. It's not just segmented brands that are just, people are just buying, because people aren't going to want that. People will go online for that. They can, they can curate that on their own. So, I think everything's going to change. So to say if high street's going to be booming or not, I think it has to go through a massive transition. And then it depends on how, and just depends on how, how it acts. But I think that, like I said, high street as well can't just all be like, all right, let's get back and start selling. It's like, why are people coming in? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, there's all these different things. Like I was even saying, if you're a CBD brand, then maybe you have some CBD ice cream. I know that Selfridges was doing CBD lattes. Just anything to kind of bring in new flows of revenue, new experiences. I don't know. I mean, the conversation goes really deep into brand. I don't want to go so blanket, but I think experiences over like buy and carry will fundamentally have to be implemented into high street. And that might mean that high street shops might end up being a lot smaller. A lot of these big 3-store place, like 3-level, like 3-story businesses might actually only take 1 level now because they can condense and create, it, like you said, it comes down to finances, it comes down to strategy, and it comes down to experience, not what you're providing, but what the consumer wants. I mean, and I think that's the greatest thing about this whole thing is that we've been seeing the consumer dictate how brands have been ethically functioning.
Yeah.
And now we're going to see the consumer dictate how they want to experience the brand at all. And I think that's a great thing because it's gone so much the other way. And that's why we have these issues with production and sustain, like all these ethics. It's because it went so internal, all about how they can make the most money. And that's where a lot of these structures are broken. So now if it's not about money, it's about, it's about figuring out how you can make more money in different places, but putting the consumer first on a lot of different spectrums. I think that alone, as consumers, we have way more power right now by default, actually, like whether brands and businesses want to believe it or not, it's simply within our space. And we'll see a lot of evolutions. I really believe that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that goes nicely into, so there's an interesting question here. It's not quite a question, so I'm going to phrase it a little differently.
Okay.
But somebody has brought up quite an interesting point. What does this mean for a brand's purpose? So, and I think this is really interesting on how this does need to shift in a way. But what they've asked is what does this mean, or how does this impact the brand's purpose now? The message surely won't be the same. So what will this need to look like?
So and this is a great question, and it makes a lot of sense. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about how your brand purpose can't be about products and selling products. And I think that for a lot of the smaller brands who were trying to mimic these selling techniques, but not really diving into brand, fundamentally, a lot of brands don't have purpose, and there's a lot of bullshit in the system. I'm not going to lie, and that's the hard truth. And we all know it. It's not even a secret. Like, we see brands and we call bullshit every day. We're like, you're not about that. Like, that's not actually in my favor. Like, you're just trying to extract. Like, we see it all the time. And so, I think that right now, that's fundamentally what's going to change. It's like people realizing the brand purpose isn't a cool photo that represents something that you're not about. That's not a brand purpose. So when I talk to a lot of my clients, one of the first questions that I ask in like my dives is, if you take your products out of the content or out of the conversation, well, then how are you engaging with your audience?
Yeah.
And they go, I don't know. And I'm like, well, because you have no brand purpose.
Interesting.
Right. And listen, it's not an easy question to answer either. I don't expect anybody to just have an answer on the spot. But fundamentally, that's what brands and businesses have to look at, because it's like, well, if I'm not selling product and I literally have nothing else to say, and that's the only way that I'm expressing my brand purpose, well, then I'm kind of kidding maybe I didn't even realize that I was kidding myself because it was going so well. But now I'm like, actually, I don't know what my brand culture is. I know what my vibe is in terms of how it looks, but what am I really talking about? Like, what value am I actually providing? And I think that that's where we're going to see a lot of shifts and a lot of brands and businesses go out of business, because if you're not creating value, if you're not standing for something that's apparent in everything that you do, well, then nobody cares. Like, and especially now, like, forget about it, especially with so many brands and businesses going this way, that if you're not, and you're still back to like, the old ways of, people are going to notice that even more now. And so I think that that's what it comes down to. It's defining what your purpose is and asking yourself, what your values are, what your culture is, and understanding the dynamic conversation there, and then, fragmenting it, but obviously making it, fragmenting it so you know all your different conversations, but then collectively you have to put it together to make sure that every conversation, it still makes sense. So if you pivot from one to the other, whether you're on a different platform or whether you're in the same campaign, whatever it is, it all still needs to kind of coincide, right?
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. I think that's really interesting. We are getting close to, or we've kind of gone a little bit over time. So I think let's go through. I want to go through this one more question that I think is quite interesting. So let's close on this, and then we'll do two more questions.
All right, I'm down.
Cool. If you're okay to kind of go over a little bit, great. So I think this is quite interesting. Someone's brought up the point about health and safety. What is this going to look like? You know, when we do get back to physical, but also now and going through this, like we do need to rethink. There's a lot we still don't know about COVID-19, a lot about, you know, delivery, parcel shipping. This industry, this is going to open up a new part of the industry, and how we deliver parcels and how they're sent and everything. But also health and safety and what that looks like going forward. I've heard a lot of talk, are face masks going to become in the future part of, you know, Western culture as well? Are we going to, you know, are gloves, like, what is actually going to be part of our new culture going forward? And I think it's kind of interesting to talk about these different options of where health and safety might go. Are we going to go into, you know, is 5 people in the supermarket going to be the new norm? I mean, what are you kind of seeing, or what are you thinking?
You know, I mean, I think that's a question that just comes down to how we resolve this issue as a whole, right? I mean, you know, you can look at the flu, like we figured that one out and we're not, you know what I mean? Like, and back then it was essentially the same thing. Like everybody was like, oh my God, we have no cure for this. Like, I don't know how to catch it. Like, I want to just like, you know what I mean? I wasn't around. I mean, I was probably a little child by then, but you know what I mean though? It's like, it's essentially the same thing. It's like, if once we have a cure and this is all essentially resolved and it's just another one of those, you know, sicknesses that we get, but is very easily treatable, then, you know, I don't think that people are going to be so worried about it. And I think that, you know, the only way that all these borders and everything's going to open up is once we actually do have some form of cure. So, you know, I think that it's just going to be absolute precautions. I think that, like, you know, a lot of, you know, factories will definitely probably have to change their approach to make their consumers feel, you know, more valued. Safer. So, you know, then there's a lot of factories closing down around too, and they have to reassess what they're doing there as well. So if there's more health and safety checks inside those places, you know, if it's monitoring your employees, if it's making sure that you know, the factories are sanitized, you know, at the end of every day, and everyone, you know, their own station needs to sanitize. You know, maybe that's it. Maybe it's wearing gloves now while they work. You know, I mean, it's really going to come down to what that looks like moving forward. But, you know, I mean, people are still shipping. I mean, listen, people are still ordering from Uber Eats.
Yeah.
Like now. And like, I wouldn't. I don't know who's making my food. Like, I don't know. Like, I'd rather just go to the grocery store and just make my own stuff and buy my pack, you know. So I don't think that's going to be so detrimental in a sense where, like, everyone's going to just not want to touch everything and everyone's going to be walking around in, like, plastic bags. But, you know, I mean, I guess we'll have to see. Like, you know, yeah. I think that if packages being delivered, because right now I'm not hearing anything about packages being delivered and people getting COVID because of it. So if it gets to a point where it is, well, then businesses and brands will have to take precautions. I mean, I'm not a health expert, so I can't really answer that, but fundamentally, that's how I feel about it. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And then one last question that I have. So we have, obviously, LDC, we have a lot of brands that we work with and that follow us, and our big purposeful mission is to support independent designers. What I would love is, let's just kind of, you know, this has been such a really interesting, a really deep conversation. We've touched on so much, but let's summarize into just a couple of key takeaways of little actions or little things that brands can just take away and really think about. So I think, what are your kind of top 3 points of advice that you would give a small business now?
So first and foremost, understand what your brand and business is actually about, what your culture is, what your values are, what you stand for, what your purpose is. I think that fundamentally right now, everybody's in a pause state, which means that you really need to reflect and be like, okay, so in listening to this conversation, being like, well, I never thought about this kind of stuff. Well, you need to step back and really go and do a deep dive into your DNA and realize whether you even have one in the first place. So I think fundamentally that's important. You know, looking at what the customers and the market's gonna need after this, as opposed to what you can provide or what you're offering. I think that those are 2 very fundamental differences in question. So I think that, you know, that way you can really look at that. And then I think you have to look at your finances and actually look at your next 12 to 18 months as a realistic business. Any business right now in any market is looking at 12 to 18.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fundamental. You can't, I mean, they're just fundamentally without kidding yourself, because you're going to span out 6 months and we don't really know what 6 months is going to look like. So I think that you have to be honest and say, okay, so this is how much money I have or I will have between the next 12 to 18. How can I use that the best as possible? Okay, so maybe I don't have that much money for that. Well, maybe I need to readjust my internal structure in terms of like my employees, or in terms of my, like if I'm a smaller brand in business, like my actual daily, like maybe I got to be more, like deploy some humility and say, okay, well, maybe I have another hobby that I just found out that I really love, then maybe I'll do that part-time, and then I'll restructure my launch strategy so that I can withstand the next 12 to 18. And I think that's great. It'll allow businesses and brands to look to the future now and be like, wow, it's like, do I want to be in this for this long? Or was I really hoping to blow up in 6 months? I mean, there's a lot that we're going to drop the next, literally in this time. And they were expecting the whole first season was going to blow up. So if they're in a state where you can't project and you're not actually looking at it as a fundamental, realistic business, I think financially that's a really good time for brands too as well. I mean, I think those would be my top three. I think fundamentally everything will stem, like anything else that you do will stem from those 3 points. I mean, yeah. Anything you want to add here? Like just at the end here, just in case I might have missed something?
No, I think you totally covered it. I mean, I think everything you've said is super crucial right now. And I think just remembering for all small businesses, you are agile, you are small enough, you can react quickly, use that to your advantage. But take this time to really understand your purpose. I mean, that's a big thing that's come through this conversation. You can do that much faster than any of these bigger companies. And I also feel like a big advantage that all small businesses have right now, from this, people are, or we're even seeing it now, people want to support local. They want to support real humans, that humanness. So remember that as part of your purpose and your DNA, that is an absolutely crucial, amazing thing to hold on to that bigger businesses don't have.
Fundamentally, yeah, definitely.
Cool. Great. Well, yeah, I think we're kind of at time. We've went a bit over, but it's been such a great discussion. Thank you so kindly for having me. I mean, and thank you everyone for bringing those questions. I think we covered a lot of really important things, and like LDC and myself as well are nothing without the community. And so, the engagement is super appreciated, and your attention is it's really acknowledged. So thank you all so very kindly. Definitely. Yeah, it's been really, really great. We hope you've had an amazing time. Please do, any burning questions, any questions at all, anything, please do DM myself on Learn Design Club and Yossi. We're here to support, we're here to chat, we're here to talk, resource sharing, ideas, anything. That's what this is all about. So please, just shoot us a message for anything. And, hopefully, we can kind of, you'll see us back here doing lives. If you have ideas or anything you want to learn or hear about, or people you want to hear from, please let us know. We just want to support. We just want to make sure the small businesses survive, and that we all come through this stronger together. Amen. Cool. All right. Well, have a lovely evening or morning or wherever it is for you in the world, and hopefully see you next time. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Yossi. Bye. Bye. Bye.